All right, today we get to have a candid conversation with Delegate Matt Morgan about some of the crazy things happening right here in Maryland. So check it out. There's some really good stuff towards the end, so stick around.
This week, we welcome our special guest, Delegate Matt Morgan.
Thanks for having me, Chris.
Thank you for coming. And we thought it'd be nice to have you in here and do maybe a recap of the session in Maryland. We were just kind of touching base on some of that stuff.
Well, our show's called Get Real, so hopefully we can do some
So this
of that
might
today.
be real.
Yeah.
So the session wasn't as bad as some of my colleagues from my side that I'll make it out to be. I won't say it was a bad session. I would say it's more of a character-building session.
I like that. Yeah. I don't like it.
I say that because for a couple different reasons. One, we did make some good headway on a lot of important bills, and really we kind of came together bipartisanly to pass some things like that really centered around mental health. And I do think we're having a mental health crisis in our country. And we passed some really good bills, I think, that to me, healthcare becomes dramatically more clear when you look at it through the lenses of supply and demand.
Yeah.
And we've gone across state lines with compacts. We've increased the provider's pay. So I think around mental health was a pretty good session. Now, to be frank, as a Republican in Maryland, there was a lot of bad stuff that happened too.
Yeah.
We didn't make much headway on crime, really no headway at all. Education, I think that went the wrong way. And culturally, we had some pretty controversial bills up there that we came in the short end of the stick of. What really stopped it from being just an awful session is the state ran out of money. And normally that you would say, wow, how could running out of money be tied with awful things?
They couldn't spend it on anything
else.
else.
Right. The $1 billion surpluses that we used to run when Hogan was governor are no longer.
Yeah, I read right after session there was this all of a sudden there was this big sum of money that got assigned to different. I don't know
it was during session we had basically a $500 million write down on the state. So in a very short time, first budget, Democrats have blown through any surplus that we had. And I'll give you a great example why it wasn't why budgetary was an important topic and led to a better session. There was a bill that came through. We passed it out of the House that dealt with giving, allowing illegal aliens to purchase health insurance in the state of Maryland. And what that does, it's subsidized by the Maryland citizens.
Right.
We're taxing their health care plans to provide a subsidy to illegal aliens. And that bill passed the House, got stuck over in the Senate, and realized the fiscal note was pretty wrong on that. Illinois did something similar in the last year, and it's costing their state billions.
Wow.
So that really that bad fiscal note or outlook kind of saved us from passing some of the really left-wing progressive policies.
It's funny, I've known you a long time and we're friends, and
we had a horrible real estate deal together.
Right, we did have a horrible real estate deal together.
We're still friends.
We are still friends, but
no hard feelings.
No. He
has hard feelings, and I was the one that should have.
It was a bad deal.
It was a bad deal.
We'll write about it in the books.
Yes, but one day. But it's funny. It's I am always fascinated with the extremism of. And I think I understand now better, how one party, how the Democrats will push their agenda and push it through because they can. Let's be real, they can. And so what happens is, I think there's this. I'm not trying to psychoanalyze it all, but you have to push back, right? And I think the problem is sometimes when you're the few voices that are pushing back, it expresses almost extremism in the other direction. Do you know what I mean?
Well,
and you understand what I'm saying, right?
Yeah.
And I'm not.
Remember when you were a kid in elementary school, and everyone used to have a teeter-totter? Remember that?
Right.
Where one kid,
we don't have those anymore, right?
Yeah, they're dangerous.
We can't use those anymore.
But you'd have 9 kids on one side. And then a lot of time to lift that teeter-totter, you had to have one kid on the very, very end.
Right.
And that's kind of how I describe politics now.
Okay.
It's hard to get any type of balance unless you move further out we could create some leverage points.
Unless you were the big fat kid. Sorry.
Yeah.
No, I wasn't. I'm just saying.
But think about it where the parties are. And I'm talking not just here in Maryland, but nationally.
Yeah.
I look at something, I'm one of the most conservative legislators in the state of Maryland. I constantly rank in the top 90 percentile year after year. I would say that my politics are to the left of what JFK was. Think about that. JFK was pro-life. He was pro-business, pro-tax cut, anti-communism.
Right.
And where you take like issues like same-sex marriage, do you really care about same-sex marriage now?
Right.
I don't.
Right.
But I'll tell you where some of this stuff is happening with the gender indoctrination, the CRT in our schools. We passed a horrible bill, in my opinion, this year that was nothing. It was only geared towards transgender reassignment surgery for minors. That's the only thing the bill did. It took us a while to uncover that. And we made it at taxpayer expense, namely Medicaid's paying for it. What? That's some of the extremism that's going on in Maryland and in the political ranks right now. And look, people like myself that, speak out because, let's face it, that's my job.
Right,
I'm not supposed to be quiet. A lot of times you take some lumps and some bruises from being out there and trying to rally troops. I mean, I look back the last 3 years, Chris, and you've known what I've done.
Right,
I mean,
right.
I've rallied to try to get the businesses reopened, the schools reopened,
right.
Vaccine mandates, the masking mandates were ridiculous. And why some of us or some other politicians from the majority party were out there rallying for Black Lives Matter, I was doing Back the Blue rallies. Because I felt it was the right thing to do. So, yeah, I think a lot of the media and just really the march to the left that the Democratic Party has done, they're creating a lot of, it's being extremely polarized. I just finished wrapping up talking to a nice group of ladies here in St. Mary's County. I was their guest speaker, and we were talking about, and they were asking me about crossover votes. And I just think there's very little crossover right now, because everyone's so polarized. Each side moves to their respective side, and as far as elections go, it's really almost about getting out your vote.
It'd be interesting to see. I know there's data out there, and I'm not, I always throw these weird things out here, but it'd be interesting to see how many Republicans voted with the Democrats and how many Democrats voted with Republicans on certain bills, right? You know what I mean? Is it that polarized that they're actually that much
inside session?
And during session.
So you're talking about with politics?
Yeah.
So look, I think there's a lot of bad rap when it comes to that. The majority of votes that we cast up in Annapolis are procedural, and a lot of them are dealing with local bills, so that we give local courtesy. So honestly, if you pulled voting records, I'd probably vote with the Democratic speaker 90% of the time.
Okay, because they're all.
And look, and even me being one of the most conservative legislators in the state, if you go back and look at where I stand and the bills I co-sponsor, I focus a lot on health care. I'm on the health and government operations. Literally half the bills I co-sponsor are Democratic-led legislation.
Right.
But think about this, and this will blow your mind. Democrats have had a supermajority in the General Assembly since 1922.
Wow.
So they've been in control for 100 years. There is not a single bill that has ever passed in the history of Maryland that was sponsored by a Republican that wasn't bipartisan.
Wow.
So think about that. You need 71 votes to pass a bill. There's 141 in the chamber. So you need 71 votes. And every bill that's come out that with a Republican name on it has been bipartisan. But year after year, we're stuck in the General Assembly with, let's face it, we're talking about 15 to 20 bills per year that really pushes their agenda forward and creates the society that we live under that Republicans tend to have a problem with. And that's what we're really talking about. And in those bills, there's not a lot of bipartisanship. We try to give some buy-in if we get amendments on bills. And we always have this saying was our job is to make bad bills better. But the other thing is when you can't make a bad bill better, you need to really rally against it and really rally people towards contacting their legislators, and getting involved, because not every problem you can fix from the inside out. You got to fix it from the outside in. And really that's getting people in the community to call and raise holy hell.
All right, so let's talk about one thing that I think is, let's talk about this gas tax.
Okay.
Right. I don't even think that was on our conversation points, but
Yeah.
so I want you to explain this gas tax, because it's last year. I remember there was a pause, if you will.
Yeah.
Was it last year or the year before?
It was
I can't remember. Last
I
year.
remember when Senator Mike Miller created a bill years ago that was the gas tax that phased in over time, and now we're starting to see the back half of that, which, talking about making bad bills better, I think that was what happened back then, was to try to create that sliding scale, but now we're on the ugly side of it.
So I know a lot about this issue because I've carried the bill that deals with decoupling from CPI. So back in 2013, Maryland raised its gas tax, but the unique thing is they also connected it to the consumer price index. So that really wasn't noticeable when inflation was in check at 1%, you know? And you know, we had a precedent in the White House that was like drill, baby, drill.
Right.
Now, Joe Biden's policy is we can't let anybody drill, and prices and supply are starting to be limited. And inflation's increasing a ton.
Right.
And we see that when we go to the grocery store. The problem is now that our gas tax is connected to CPI, it's starting to creep up. 2 cents a year, 3 cents a year, 4 cents a year. In the last 2 years, it's gone up 30%. So we have another 6 cents increase July 1st on Saturday.
Wow.
For a
6
total, yeah. So we're the fourth highest gas tax in the nation right now at 47 cents a gallon. So while you're looking over at Virginia that did something similar, but it's like at a much lower rate, Virginia's gas tax is barely 30 cents. I think it's 29.2 or something like that.
For those
so
of
when
you
you
that-
go over to Dalgar and you have like the dramatic price drop going across the bridge, that's the reason why.
That's what I was going to
It's
say.
state
For those
taxes.
of you that didn't know, when you wonder why it's so much cheaper
Cheaper
in
over
one
there,
state
that's why.
versus the other, there it is.
Right.
About 20 cents, by the way. If
So
you
where
think
does
about
all
the
that
difference
money
here.
go?
It goes to the Transportation Trust Fund, and that's another pain in my existence there. Look, Transportation Trust Fund is made up of like, I believe, corporate income tax and title and vehicle registration fees, but the predominant funding source is the gas tax.
Right.
And look, 61% of that fund is spent on mass transit. So most of the motorists don't even get the benefit of the money
gas
that they're
tax is paying for
mass
rail.
transit. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, Metro sucks in a lot of money.
Right.
And look, I mean, I just put an email out about this. If those are on my email list, you can go to voteformattmorgan.com and just type your name in the little box there, and you'll be added to my email list. Governor.
That's why we're talking about it, because I saw
Yeah.
the email.
Well, thanks for inviting me on. Governor Westmore just announced that he's going to revamp the Red Line up in Baltimore. And for those that don't know that, that's like a big dig project, a metro type project. Was estimated at $9 billion.
Wow.
So,
But yet we can't get a new Thomas Johnson Bridge that when you drive over, there's potholes in it.
Yeah,
Certain days you might be able to see the water through the,
Look, the Thomas Johnson Bridge, I mean, look, it's at the, I think the term state highways use, it's what is it, dysfunctionally usable or something like that? They have,
That's like a flat tire.
Yeah. It's like you can still drive
it, but it's dysfunctional.
So it is weird terms and stuff. But look, I'll tell you the one problem with the Thomas Johnson Bridge. They're always thinking like it's political power, right? We need to get political power.
No.
Well, the last time I checked, for years, we had Steny Hoyer on one side of the bridge and Mike Miller on the other side.
Right.
The second ranking Democrat in the nation, Mike Miller, the most powerful person in the General Assembly.
Right.
And I'll tell you, last year, they passed a $1 trillion infrastructure bill in D.C., $1.2 trillion. And even though Mike Miller is no longer with us, there's still a lot of people in Southern Maryland that have some political steam behind them. I think it's almost embarrassing that our federal elected officials
didn't get us that.
I mean, look, this is the second time in the 8 years that I've been in office that we've had a $1 trillion major infrastructure bill. First one came under Obama, now under Biden. And look, when we're talking about Democratic politics, I mean, in Maryland, Chris Van Hollen, you got some heavyweight politicians. Where's the money? Show me the beef, as they would say back in the 80s.
Yeah, where's the beef?
So in our chamber legislative event in Calvert County that we had. That one of the hats I wear, I chair the Business Advisory Committee, used to be formerly known as Government Affairs for the Calvert County Chamber. So in our post-legislative event this year, Senator Bailey said, I don't think that there's any chance that we'll get a Thomas Johnson Bridge without a toll. Do you believe that?
I don't know.
Yeah.
But I really think we need to start asking the residents whether that's a possibility.
Right.
Obviously, if this red line project goes through in Baltimore, I think every bit of money
is going in that direction.
Yeah, everything's going up there to the metropolitan area there. So the reason why I say the residents need to be asked on that. I don't drive across that bridge every day.
Right.
That was a big contention. I represent North St. Mary's, and was always like, what do you think is more important, the Thomas Johnson or the Harry Nice?
Right.
And I'm almost scared to even poll that question because
right.
I had so many residents to go across the Harry Nice Bridge.
Right.
Yeah.
But look, I think it is time to ask the residents whether you think that thing would ever be built without it having a toll on it. Because if it's going to have a toll, you might want to look at a private solution or a private company to do that. If the residents are, that drive across it every single day, or say, well, you know what, forget that, we're going to hold out and wait for it. And look, I don't want to see a toll on that bridge when I go over the Solomons. That's one less bill to pay. Right. But I do know that as the state is struggling and scratching for money, because let's say
they're not struggling and scratching. There's spending
reallocating it.
Well,
they're spending.
Right. There's not a revenue problem. There's a spending problem.
Right.
But it is the varsity team in control right now.
Right.
That as far as spending money, I got to think that with the investment they made in Easy Pass throughout the state, I think the days of the toll road, and plus with EV not paying into the gas tax, and they have a major push for electric vehicles going there. They have a 60% goal by 2031. They cut back selling gas-powered vehicles by 40% in the state by 2027. This stuff is coming fast. I got to think that they're probably going to go to I think they're probably going to go to a policy that results in using that Easy Pass more.
Yeah, right. I was going to say the Easy Pass technically is the Maryland taxpayer. Right. Let's be real. Right. Let's be real.
Right.
You already
There's
are.
No doubt.
And then honestly, what frustrates me, honestly, and it truly is frustrating, is because if we get to the root of what you said, is
the root of the problem is we need some fiscal management.
We do.
In the state.
But I just think another note of that is when such a huge portion of that money comes from the commuter, which is, let's be real, people working, and rural areas probably dominate that more than the metropolitan areas, right?
A lot more gas.
Right. So the bulk of that tax money probably is generated in the rural areas.
I would think. To rural Maryland.
I would think.
Wow.
And it's being spent
up the road
elsewhere.
That's an interesting observation.
Yeah.
And a very good case, for misappropriating.
It's not right, and I think we.
Well, so many times in Maryland, before we were on the air here, we were talking a little bit about the recreational marijuana stuff going into law, and that's on July 1st. And look, that law is written like I would say like a woke college intern.
It's pretty big too. That's pretty big.
Yeah, I mean there is more problems with that legislation, and mark my words, we'll be fixing that legislation every year for the next.
I think the Democrats had acknowledged that they're going to have to fix it.
Yeah, I mean there's
a lot of unanswered questions.
Right.
But I will tell you the one thing that a lot of people voted for that back in November on the ballot initiative was they thought it was a revenue generator for the state.
Right.
I mean, a lot
of people still think that, so this is important to put out.
But there's nothing built in specifically to tax it, right?
Well, I tell you, it was comical going into it because I've been around long enough where you can kind of see through this. And they were like, well, we're going to fund the schools. We're going to fund the Kerwin, the blueprint with the marijuana. And I was like, well, yeah, cool. We'll call it Pot for Tots.
Tots?
Pot for Tots, it doesn't even exist. By the fiscal note, this legislation this marijuana sales are only supposed to bring in like $20 million the first year. That wouldn't pay for the HVAC replacement at Chapacua High School. So, I mean, it's a little bit ridiculous when everything is phased in. Hold on. When everything's phased in, I think it's supposed to top off there about $80 million, which is dropping a bucket when you're talking about a state education bill right now at $9.3 billion.
That's what I was going to say. I was going to say that $20 million isn't even going to pay for the part of Kerwin that removes the teeter-totters from the playground.
It puts a little weight on one side for everything.
Yeah.
So, so it goes into law July 1st. The comptroller put out something that was interesting, saying that if you have a medical marijuana card, because the one thing the legislation did was get rid of all the medical marijuana stuff. Now it's just the distributors are the distributors. So if you have a medical marijuana card, if you buy whatever you buy, you don't have to pay tax on it.
No.
Huh.
How about that?
Nice.
That was one of the nuances no one thought about that just came out. So, yeah.
Interesting. Yeah. So not only we've now
so there's like no revenue coming in it.
Yeah, we're taking less now.
Yeah.
I mean,
I'm assuming the $20 million is just based off of income tax because there's no specific.
Well, there's a tax. Yeah,
there
is. It's a 9%.
But it's not even close to alcohol.
So alcohol is 9%. Marijuana will be at 9% when it's phased in. So I think it starts off at like 6%.
Gotcha.
So that's why it's $20 million that might go up.
Do you know
to
how long the phase-in is?
Or $80 million. I'm sorry, $80 million when it's completely.
Do you know when the phase-in is? How long it is?
It's like it phases in 1% per year.
Yeah, so it'll phase in faster than or slower than the electric vehicle law will.
Yeah, about the same time you're.
We're getting 9% on marijuana. We'll be at 60% electric cars.
Wait. I need my crystal ball here. You know why? Because here's what's happening. I see less income from marijuana, less income from gas vehicles. 9 years. 9 years bankruptcy in the state of Maryland.
It won't be bankruptcy. We're just going to be taxing something else.
Taxing.
Well, I'll tell you, the real problem with this is, it's supposed to be this generator for the revenue generator for the schools, but you got to think that there's going to be some significant law enforcement challenges.
Yeah.
But I understand none of the money is allocated for law enforcement. Is that correct?
No. And here's an issue, I tell you. Because nothing works. One problem I would say with Republicans in the General Assembly, they always want to look at one bill in a silo. And that's not really how Democrats move legislation. They'll have a bill, an associated bill, and that's how they accomplish their goals. The bills move in tandem with each other. And it might be in two different committees, and I mean, it's a pretty brilliant strategy they use. And one bill that went through was HB 1071, if I'm not mistaken. And what that bill did was disallow police officers, if they smell marijuana, you can no longer search vehicles.
Right.
And the problem with that is that's where 80% of the illegal guns in the state are found. Right. Even the Democratic state's attorney from Montgomery County came out about a month ago urging the governor to veto this.
Yeah.
Because this, I mean, it's going to result in
that was the reason for searching suspicious.
Right. And even he came out and said, "Look, this is going to lead to people dying." And it was so effective that Wes Moore, the governor, didn't veto it, but he also didn't sign the legislation and would let it go into law without his signature. So it is a little infuriating, especially when we have people like from Moms Demand Action come up there and people on the left. They're like, we just want some common sense gun control. But then they passed this legislation that really took 80% of the illegal guns off the street. There's no good guy. There's no good guy in the situation when you have an illegal firearm.
Right.
And I think that was one of the worst bills that we passed this session.
Wow.
Well, I think we're about I want to make sure we give you a platform to go ahead.
I have a question.
Sure, fire away.
I want a rapid fire of some of the craziest bills that you've seen come through Annapolis. What's interesting to me, so with my involvement with the chamber and just hosting the legislative pre and post breakfast every year for the last 7 years, we like to bring up bills that didn't pass. which is ironic because I've seen some blowback on that.
Right, I know what you're going with here.
That didn't pass. We don't need to talk about it, but then it comes back next year.
Yeah.
And next
Those
year.
are the
and
ones
next
they
year.
fight us.
And it doesn't pass until it does.
Right.
So
it's funny. Like a bill will hit the chamber, and we'll have a committee hearing on it, and we're like, "That's a stupid idea. Right. Like, you don't do that." And then, like, it comes back the next year.
Next year they change the name.
Next year,
they keep changing the name until it sounds better. Yeah.
They remove the situation from daycare centers and
right.
And the next thing you know, it ends up passing. Yeah. So there is a laundry list of stupid bills that I could go through. One was, we're always told that gender indoctrination and the CRT stuff doesn't happen in the classroom. Well, lo and behold, HB 119 this year was pushed through to legalize that stuff in the classroom. As the classroom is a curriculum change. Fortunately, that bill died in the Senate. A bill that passed, SB 611 from this year. What that bill did was set up a criminal investigation unit inside the Attorney General's office to investigate people that were in businesses that are non-compliant with climate change rules and regulations.
What?
Yes. That's how crazy that is.
Oh, my goodness.
We had a bill, I mentioned earlier, the transgender bill. Look, I mean, on that bill, I don't think anyone was confirming anyone's gender. You're confirming their dysphoria. And look, the bill had nothing to do with people that are 18 years and older, because that's already law in the state of Maryland. What this bill did was simply allow for minors that are suffering from gender dysphoria to seek out puberty blockers and surgeries on the taxpayer's dime. And I think that was crazy and completely harmful for a lot of these people that are struggling with this problem.
Yeah.
Matt, a lot of people, when we hear those things, right, like, I hear you, and I didn't mean to interrupt, but I want you to, I think the problem is so many people don't understand what the bill, like the average person, right, if you, and the perception of something like that, if and the other side spins it in a way that makes it sound like, hey, it should be fair for everyone to have that, and I, it's just like one of those things that locks. I think it's the words matter, right? Yeah. And it's interpretation sometimes too. I think
words do matter, and but you have to be frank and tell people what is going on.
Yeah.
And right now I see with media dominance by the left, and they have it. Let's face it. I mean, that's always the ironic thing with Republicans. They sit there and it's like, well, they talk about voter fraud and things like that. It's like, but Democrats control like the K through 12 system, the higher ed system, almost all the media. Like anything where people would form their opinion,
they own it.
They own it. And for Republicans out there and say, you know what, there's not a lot of diversity of thought. So I think the need for Republican politicians to come out and do what we're doing right now, to come out there and talk about our side and why we think these policies are bad or good.
Right.
And I'll tell you another one why we're talking about wacky bills. There was a bill this year that allows you to cure your ballot. Like when you mail it in.
Wait a minute, cure?
Cure your ballot. Let's say that you mail in your ballot on November 5th. Okay. Or no, I'm sorry, October 5th. But the election is November 5th. And your ballot's at the Board of Election. You can change who you voted for on your ballot via text messaging.
What?
So do you think there could possibly be any issues or problems that could possibly
not
come
at all.
from that?
No, that sounds
completely
right.
reasonable,
sounds
right?
Up and up. Yeah.
So that's the kind of
Do you want me to change your ballot
crazy
for you, Mark?
Yeah. Can you text?
Can I text?
How's that work with the breakthroughs that we've had in AI? Like, where's the security at?
Right.
So look,
somebody already owns the ballot changing robot.
Yeah, they do. Oh Lord.
And I can bet you which party invested. Sometimes I always tell people what we deal with is right now, and it goes back to this whole topic where we're talking about with JFK. So much of the things we're dealing with now are not Republican or Democratic issues. They're right or wrong.
Right.
And like Reagan said, there's not Democrat and Republican. There's just up and down. So like, where do you want to stand? And I would encourage people that, to get involved, like,
Right.
And really figure this out, because, when it gets down to it, these politicians are still supposed to work for you.
Right.
Well, I mean, it's always I've truly found over the last few years, it's about really being involved and knowing what bills have what. And every day you see a new bill and you're like, wait a minute. And I'll message somebody and be like, hey, what does this mean? What does that look like? And you learn something, and you're like, that's stupid,
What
right?
the heck is that?
Or sometimes, honestly, sometimes you go, well, that makes sense, I mean, like, and then you could support it or not, right?
Yeah, right. So we have a lot of bills. There's 2,000 bills that get submitted
Right.
per year.
Yeah.
About 500 to 600 normally pass. So there is a lot of commonality between the parties, because a lot of stuff, which you're only having a part-time legislature that comes in 3 months out of the year.
Yeah.
So a lot of times you're fixing the legislation that you passed a year before.
Right.
Or you're redoing sunsets, or you're looking at policy and stuff like that.
And Lord knows we don't want to give them
new
any more time. So
Right.
the
Yeah.
3 months is
Well-
just fine.
Actually, you could cut it back to
So-
45
Yeah, I'm
days.
okay
It would
with
be
that.
much better.
I'm just thinking of some of the crazy real estate stuff. So
Yeah, I
during
know.
COVID, if you were getting evicted from your
Right.
property, you were assigned a public defender on the taxpayer's
Right.
dollar.
Well.
Right.
Well, I'll
Yeah,
tell you a
kinda.
crazy. I'll tell you a crazy real estate bill that passed for this session is in St. Mary's County. We have a greater than the rest of the neighboring counties amount of Section 8 vouchers
Right.
that are out there. And if you remember, a few years ago, they removed what they call source of income.
Yep.
From that.
Yeah, I was going to bring that up next.
So that's fine. We can talk about
Yeah.
that. And basically, what that is it disallows the landlord to discriminate on the money the tenant has gotten
Which was
from
to
where
force
it's come from.
landlords to accept.
It forces
Section 8
landlords
vouchers.
to
Or-
accept Section 8. And the reason for that was to take areas that are historically Section 8 or have a disproportionately high amount of vouchers to push them out into other areas.
Right.
So we've had even local politicians, to my chagrin, say, hey, you know what? We need to push Section 8 out into Mechanicsville and areas like that, because Lexington Park has too high of a disproportionate amount. They passed a bill this year, and I'm sad to say a lot of Republicans voted for it, including several of our local delegation, that expands, creates a state Section 8 program and offers $10 million of state money if you're on the federal waiting list.
Right.
So, if so I'm like, if you were against the source of income, why would you want to create more Section 8 vouchers?
Right.
It doesn't make a lot of sense. And I don't think people in like Golden Beach, Mechanicsville, and area want that pushed out into that area.
Right.
I think it's a bad policy.
Well.
Well, I can't wait to have you back on and
Yeah.
hear about.
We
what
definitely
comes
should
up
have
in
him come
this-
back on, because we literally have a list a mile long we could still talk about. I mean, it's so
Absolutely.
funny, and that's what we talk about here. We're get real. We'll talk to anybody about anything. We want you in here.
I think it would be good to have you or anybody else
Yeah,
come on
I mean-
and talk about some of the bills that are being pre-filed.
Honestly,
right
it'd be
before
fun to have
session.
another Democrat here, or somebody
I'd love
that
to
can
do that.
have a little debate and
Yeah.
maybe talk about talking points and stuff like that over some of these more controversial legislation.
Yeah, we'd love to do that. So.
That would be good. We'll bring popcorn and then
Yeah, we'll sit in the corner.
We'll let you duke it out. With
No, it'll be a good time. It'll
Yeah,
be fun.
for sure.
So thank you all for having me on
Yeah,
there. And
thank
like I
you.
said,
Good to see you.
yeah, people, if they want to, go to my website, get involved, and that's what I would stress to them, that it really, at this point, it takes residents' participation in politics to make sure anything like happens.
Again, your
So,
website's
voteformattmorgan.com.
voteformattmorgan.com.
So,
Awesome.
Awesome.
thanks a lot.
All right.
Thanks, Matt.
See you.